our past, our mistakes, going through this acute period of turmoil of switching careers into something different, working myself to the bone, getting married, and then very quickly after that falling apart in the midst of my brother, his life just being ripped out from underneath him, or at least that's what it felt like at the time. That's a humbling place to be. And whether or not people that are listening, you've gone through something like this, or maybe for you, it is just something maybe even that feels more simple or even harder than this, no matter what the scale is, difficult things like this, as much as we do not like to think about this at the time, they are hopefully for our good. And I look back at these things and I think, I am not happy that I had to go through this, but I'm so grateful that I did, because I get to tell God's story in it. And I get to stand here before you today, not feeling guilt from that, not feeling shame from that, knowing that I've totally been released from that stuff.
Hey everybody, it's Pastor Tom of the 24 Today podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to thank you for all of the different subscribes and the thumbs up and just the different ways that you have been supporting this podcast and what we've got on YouTube and all this. I really appreciate it because it helps to get the message out further. And today we've got a really great message. I'm so excited to have Lara Casey with me today. I am a fan of her podcast. One of the biggest fans. She has recently started it, but I have jumped on the subscribe wagon really quick, and I love everything that she puts out. She has one of the best websites that I have seen, and it's called cultivatewhatmatters.com, and she is the founder and CEO of that, and she can tell you more about that as we go. But Lara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. I'm just so grateful to be here.
Well, listen, I know that there's so much that I want to talk to you about, and our time is limited. So if it's okay, I just want to jump right into it. And get going. So just quickly, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, family, career, so forth.
Yes. So like you said, I'm the CEO of Cultivate What Matters, which we are a company that exists to help you do just that, to help you to sift through all the distractions and all of the mess of life to really focus on what matters most in the big picture. And we do that through a tool called the Power Sheets Goal Planner and several other things that we have in our online shop. But for me, the heart of that comes from being a mama to three. I am a mom of three very busy kiddos. I'm a very grateful wife. We have quite the story of God really completely changing our hearts and our lives. And so I'm fueled and motivated through those difficult experiences that we've had to do the work that I do today. So I'm just grateful to be here.
And you have a little daughter named Grace, which is really kind of just in honor, really, of everything that God has done for you in your life.
Yes. So we named her for the gift that God gave us. It was right after she was born. Our marriage had gone through a very difficult time and came back together, and couldn't think of a better name for her.
And you had a very, very popular magazine. I've never been. I'm a minister, so I do a lot of weddings, but I've never personally had the reason to buy a bride type of magazine. But tell me a little bit about the magazine that you founded, and it's a big part of your life.
It was absolutely just such a joy to think back on God taking our paths in ways we never would expect him to take us. And this was one of those I never, ever, even telling you here now, it's about, almost 15 years past the time that I had started Southern Weddings. I still pinch myself and say, Lord, I was not equipped for that. How did you put me in that spot? But that is the story, is that I started Southern Weddings magazine. From the ground up. I have a degree in music theater. I don't have a degree in publishing. And so when my husband was deployed to Iraq for a period of time, I needed a project, something to keep my mind occupied. And I was dabbling in wedding planning and floral design at the time. And I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if we had a wedding magazine that
Mm-hmm.
was telling couples about how to plan a meaningful beginning to married life and how to tell their unique love story in ways that seemed different than just, stuffed chicken and tulle. So I created that from the ground up on my little computer and had no idea that it would go anywhere. We thought we'd put it in local churches or grocery stores,
Right.
and God had a different plan. He just kept pushing it forward and pushing it forward. And 10 years in, at our 10-year anniversary, this is a very long story short, we just really felt like we had completed the work that God had given us to do, and started to feel a lot of friction with running two growing businesses at once. So I had Southern Weddings and Cultivate What Matters. Cultivate was growing like a beautiful weed. And so we made the difficult decision last year to move into a new chapter and close the doors on Southern Weddings and retire the brand, which was very hard. It's hard to let go of something
it's a big part of you. Yeah.
But it was a leap of faith that I'm very glad now that we took. I was very sad about it at the time, but very glad I took it because it allowed us to have room and margin and space to meet people in not just a marrying stage of life, but in all stages of life. So yeah, it's been a bittersweet time, but good.
Oh yeah. Real quickly, tell me about your podcast that I love so much, just the name of it. And then I'm going to get going. And I actually want to take a lot of quotes from podcasts of yours that I've listened to kind of help us walk through your story. So tell me briefly about your podcast.
Sure. It's the Cultivate Your Life podcast. And I'm laughing because it just started on my birthday this last year on December 27th. But really, I feel like it's been growing in us for years. And I've always resisted it. Like, no, I will not do a podcast. No, I don't have time for that. And sometimes it just, things happen at the right time. I'm just grateful. So it's the Cultivate Your Life podcast.
Yeah, and you do so well. And you bring your kids in on it, like to do little commercials, and it's fun.
They have so much fun.
It's a lot of fun.
I'll give you a spoiler alert. The next episode may or may not have us jamming out with my husband playing guitar. So.
All right. So anyway, listeners, make sure that you get that podcast as well as the other things that Laura does. So here we go. You say in one of your podcasts, and I'm quoting, "What if you made a list of dreams as a kid and had to stick to that list no matter what? You weren't allowed to switch course or change your paths?" Now, in that case, I'd be a very unhappy archaeologist right now, and I wouldn't have met Ari. I'm so glad that my paths did not follow a linear path. It was more of a zigzag.
It was very, very up and down zigzag. So yes, as I kind of briefly mentioned, not just with my career. I mean, I went to school for music theater at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thought that's what I was going to do. And my career, I've taken 5 different major career turns in my life. But that aside, it really has been an imperfect path, which I think so many of us can relate to. We think, oh, I've messed up so much in my life. There's no way the Lord could use me for something good, or I've messed up so much in my life. There's no way I could follow a more linear path. And what I mean by that is, so my husband, he, from what I can see, sort of followed what I'd consider a linear path. He is an interventional radiologist. He teaches here at the university, and he went to school for biology, went to med school, did his training. He was on this grade 26 is where he was going. So he kind of knew what his path was going to be. Not many ups and downs. I, however, have had all of those career ups and downs. I have been through divorce and miscarriage and loss and heartache and so many things in there that when you look at those things on paper, it looks like imperfection. It looks like mess. But what I now know to be true is that God can take all those broken pieces and make them into something marvelous. And as you're going through hard stuff in your life, it is so easy to think, what good is going to come of this? So that's why I say I've had a zigzag of a path, and I'm so grateful for the zigs and the zags now.
And it's given you a real special heart and sensitivity to those who struggle with being perfect. I know that's a big part of what you do, and that is, we struggle with this thought of trying to be perfect, whether you're a man or a woman. You have this whatever it is in your mind that you have to achieve, and that's a killer, and that burns you out and makes life unlivable. But you have an especially sensitive heart toward that. I'm assuming because of it wasn't a linear, and it still isn't a linear path for you.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Just today, I was in a meeting, and there's something that just kind of threw me off course in this meeting. I got an email about something that just made me feel sad. And I thought to myself, here I was like leading this meeting really well. And I had my A game on, and then something came in and just knocked me off my feet. And I said to God, why can't I be perfect? Why can't I just like have my emotions in check all the time? Yeah. And he says back to me, because you wouldn't need me. If you were perfect, you would not need me. Yeah. I have a soft spot for that because it is something that I'm in all the time. I'm right there trying to do life well and kind of taking it to an extreme sometimes.
But, that's reading your comments and all that I have up from your podcast, and that's why people like you so much, and that's why you're effective. I gave up a long time ago of the fact that I didn't have to have really good hair because I'm never going to have a good, it's gone. And so I gave, and so just laugh about it. But, I'm just, I'm just imperfect, and that's who I am. And so, okay. So you say, I'm quoting now, when I graduated from college, I moved to New York City and had a great agent and thought I was going to be on Broadway for the rest of my life until I started to feel something inside me that was restless. I felt like I was constantly auditioning for my life. My body was an instrument. My body and brain, my heart, my soul, my spirit, they felt broken. They felt imperfect, end quote.
Oh, man, I have to take a deep breath just even remembering that, because this push for performance that we have to rise to some standard that somebody made up, which is usually us. It's usually the cumulative effect of our upbringing, of things we have digested from the media, so many things wrap up into this picture that we have of who we're supposed to be. And man, it just wears me out to think about how much that Lara strove. And times that I feel little tiny bits of that creeping, because it's not like we're always going to be perfect with this stuff, but times I feel those things creep in, like I'm auditioning for my life. I remember her. I remember that feeling of auditioning for my life, and it stops my tracks.
My body was an instrument, you say. That's a really strong, to me, that's a really gripping statement. Can you go into that more? My body was an instrument.
Yeah. So, in theater, your body, your voice, your ability to move on stage, everything is your instrument with which to create art. And it's a wonderful blessing. There's so many things that are so good about theater. But for me personally, I have known since college that I'm a very sensitive person. And I share about that in one of the episodes of the podcast, that I had a teacher once that told me that I was sensitive, and I thought that meant I was weak, that I wouldn't do anything strong in my life. And she didn't mean it that way, but that's the way I took it. And so being in theater and being an introvert, I'm very much an introvert. I thrive on solitude, but always having to go to auditions, always having to be on my best performance skill level is exhausting. And I think you have to be a really special person to do that, and to not feel like you can actually just be yourself. Because it's interesting, on the surface level, being in theater, you're actually supposed to be someone else all the time. Sure. So there's not as much room for you to just be yourself. And I craved that. I just wanted to be myself and help others do the same.
And yet you felt exposed out there on the stage. How vulnerable. How awful that must have been to have all the lights and everything, everybody looking at you, and
Not
wasn't
me.
what was working for you. So you had this dream of you were going to be on Broadway for the rest of your life, and then you start to just get more honest about the reality of what is going on in your heart. So you walk into your agent's office and you say this: sometimes you have to close one door before another door even opens. Tell me about that walk into the office.
Yes. So, what I wasn't able to share in that podcast episode was, just because I didn't have time, is there was an inciting incident before this. My grandfather, who was someone that really influenced my life in huge ways, especially my faith, he passed away shortly before that. And I was on this podium giving part of his eulogy. And I remember, so I have a younger brother. He's 4 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my brother was in high school at the time, because I had just graduated from college. He was in high school. I remember standing there, and in the middle of me giving this speech, the doors opened in the back, and it was two of my younger brother's friends. It's getting all emotional. They were dressed in three-piece suits, and these were two gentlemen that I had thought were just hooligans,
Mm-hmm.
like the riff-raff friends from my brother. They were sweet guys, but I never would have imagined them walking into my grandfather's funeral in such a respectful attire, coming there to this very intimate experience to support my brother. And that was just a picture for me of the impression that my grandfather had left on people. And here he was someone that did not have big accomplishments to speak of. I mean, he had nothing on paper. If you were to ask him his proudest accomplishment in life, he without a doubt would have said being married to his wife, Celeste. And so there was something about Cecil that left an impression on all of us. And it was in that moment of realizing, wow, I want that. I want whatever that where does that come from? And that really pushed me to think about the big picture of my life. Am I going in that direction? Is this career really leading me in that way? And the answer was no. And sometimes when you have a jarring experience, a tipping point, if you will, whether it is the death of a loved one or loss or a transition or even a life or death experience, you're in an almost car wreck. It just makes your life flash before your eyes, and it gives you an opportunity to pivot. And so I walked into my agent's office a week later and just told him I didn't want to do this anymore. And like you said, I had nothing lined up after that. There was no next career for me. I just knew that wasn't it. So it was a bold move, but sometimes you have to close one door, like I said before, another one's going to open.
And a lot of the listeners can relate so much to this because they know that in order to survive, in order to live, they're going to have to shut a door. But yet, it's not how, we always want to know if we shut one door, there's always another one we've got plans to open it up, or we know it's going to open up in another week after we recoup from what we've been going through. But it doesn't. Most of the time, life doesn't really work out that way. So you shut that door, and then you get a job as a waitress.
Yes. I think I had that job for maybe a few days.
What kind of restaurant?
Before I realized. It was, I can't remember the name of it. I've been
trying
for like 3 years to remember the name of this restaurant, but it was like this healthy food place, and the tables were like, a foot away from each other, and the kitchen was like the size of my closet. And I remember getting like ranch dressing spilled on my shoes, and I thought, man, I'm dealing with angry people all the time.
Yeah.
This may not be the best transition for me. So, yeah.
And you say, and I quote, love this quote, you can have weeds in your garden and still have flowers. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I'm an unlikely gardener. Out here in my garden, I've learned so many lessons about life. And one of the biggest ones is that I can go without weeding or watering my garden for a few days, and things might look a little droopy. They might get a little mad at me. Some things might look like they're about to die. but the garden is really forgiving. And I can go out there with a plant that literally like looks like it's hanging over off a balcony. It's so droopy. And I can give it a drink of water and it perks right back up. And I think it's the same with our lives, that we focus so much on taking the weeds out. We focus so much on the imperfection that we lose the sight of the garden itself. And that's happened to me so many times. I go out there and I say out loud, oh, I have so much weeding to do. But I miss the butterfly sitting right in front of me on top of the zinnia that is totally happy with weeds all around it. So yeah, I mean, you think about these periods of our life that feel so acutely difficult, and maybe someone that's listening, you're there right now. But you can grow a life and still be imperfect. You can be right in the middle of the mess right now, and good things can still grow in it.
By the way, this episode is called My Messy Story. And so that's exactly what we're talking about. Do you think did you have any idea at that point in your story, and everything was really messy, but do you think you had any idea of what the weeds were at this point in your story?
No.
And if there were any flowers, or is that later on that you, and just in general, would you say that's just kind of something you figure out later on?
I did not see this. I think it is so difficult when you're in it. And I also don't think you're supposed to see it. Because there are times too, like I was also grieving the loss of my grandfather, you know, like there are times when we are just supposed to be in grief, and that's where we are. And if we, like, did I draw a life lesson from that at that point? Probably not. Later on, absolutely. Like it's amazing to me, Tom, to think back on this story and to think, wow, that actually was a part of my life.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that when we're in those situations, we feel like they're going to last forever. We feel like they're never going to be alleviated from us. But they do. They really do. There are very few things that actually do stay on the exact same note forever and ever. Yes, we will have challenges that follow us from day one of our lives to the very end, but they don't always follow the same note. And
just an encouragement for those that are listening again. Whatever it is that you're going through that you can't stand, that you don't think that you can face this one more day, just know that someday you will be through it, and someday you will be past it, and someday it might even be hard for you to remember all of the specific. In fact, you'll just have to think, oh yeah, that did. And isn't that encouraging though, just to think that whatever it is you're going through, someday this really will be behind you, and you'll be a different person, and you'll grow from it. You'll be able to cultivate it as that's what you're all about. By the way, this is Lara Casey that I'm with, and her site I'd love for you to go to is called cultivatewhatmatters.com. There's so many things on your site. It's like a color feast. I mean, you're big into colors, and so you could all of your products. You got a lot of really, really cool things there, but it's just like all these colors and power sheets. Tell me just a little bit more about your, because it's about being intentional, about developing goals, and still being imperfect about it all along.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up that analogy of the garden, because that's really like our lives. Like we feel like, well, first of all, I'll say that you may hear me talk about power sheets or goal planning. You're like, that's for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't do that. I'm just going to tell you, I'm not a goal person. And people are always shocked to hear that, but I'm really not. Like, I am a lazy person at heart. Like, I do like to resist change. I like to resist challenge. And that's why I use this tool. And whether you get power sheets or not, the process is what we see all around us, which is uncovering what matters to you first. The first many pages of the power sheets walk you through that process. And I'll just stop at that point, because that is the most difficult thing to do in our day and age, is to uncover your purpose, if you will, to get clarity on who you are and what your purpose here is on this earth. is so difficult because there's so much noise.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many distractions from that, or opportunities to compare our lives to other people and not really see our unique path. And so really that's what Power Sheets, at least the beginning part of it, help you to do. And then they move you through a process of making an action plan and living it out little by little.
Yeah. So again, just a reminder for those that are listening in, Laura is super motivated, very high performer, yet very real about the fact that she's imperfect like we all are. And that's the thing that you'll really love about her. She will say things like, there are days that she doesn't do her laundry, and so her laundry will, right? And but you're okay with it so that you can do some other things that matter more at the moment, and then you come back and you do that thing, but you're not so and I guess enslaved to that you have to do something all the time. And anyway, very, very flexible.
And I get crumbs on the floor at every meal.
Yeah.
But I get really tired of sweeping up the crumbs. So sometimes I just have to say, okay, got to let it be. I sometimes wish I had a dog. And we let the crumbs go until the end of the day, and then we'd break out the dustbuster. But
all right, back into your story. So now at this point in the story, you are working as a waitress at a restaurant that you can't even remember, but you just know you didn't like it. And you're living off of very limited savings, and you say that you knew you couldn't stay there forever. And then you say, and I quote, somehow the pain of staying the same started to outweigh the pain of change.
Yes. So, I was in a deep, dark place. I fell into a depression at that point. I thought, first of all, I was in the middle of grief still. This man who had meant so much to my whole family was in the middle of grief. So that was difficult. And here I had left this career that everybody in my peer group was still doing, and I was not. And it was a very visible thing. People thought that I was going to be doing this career, and it just wasn't. I fell out of love with the business. I knew that I didn't want to do it. And I didn't have another open door yet. So during this time of waiting is hard.
It is.
It's just hard.
Terrible.
It is. It's hard. But I will say, looking back on my life, every time I've had to wait on something, and I'm like preaching to myself here, that it has always been the most fruitful times. Always been times when I feel like my strength grew, my faith grew, and I'm so glad I waited, because if I would have jumped ahead and made a different decision, I wouldn't have been on this path. So
the Bible's full of wait. The Bible's full, you find that word a lot, more than I ever even knew until I had a period, 12 months of burnout in my life, and extended on for, close to 2 years. But I didn't even know wait was in Scripture as much as it is until I burn out, and it's all over the place, and it's so much a part of just being a child of God, and it's waiting and trusting. And anyway, so I interrupted you, but for
good reason. So it was a good reminder.
So you're running out of money. You knew you couldn't stay there very long, and you went to a gym late at night.
I did. I don't even really know what compelled me to go there. I think it was because I was so depressed that I knew the textbook knowledge in me knew, okay, if you're feeling depressed, you should probably exercise a little bit. You don't want to be sad all day. It was in the middle of winter in New York City, which is a very isolating place to be to begin with. And I was living on, I don't think I've ever told the story. I was living on Roosevelt Island, which is this tiny little strip of island that's right between Queens and the city. I don't think most people know that it's there because it was originally the home to a mental hospital. That's all that was on that little island. And then there was an apartment complex, and that's where I lived. So I just felt desperate. I felt like I can't stay in this crazy island for all my time in winter in this 400 square foot apartment that I share with 3 people. I need to go somewhere. And the one thing that I knew was right across the bridge, and my first stop was a gym. And so I decided to, in some really baggy clothes, because I had gained a lot of weight by then. I'd gained like 30 pounds in a few weeks, which was crazy. I went to the gym and I saw this trainer there, and he was working with people. And after their sessions, they just looked lighter. They looked happier. And I thought, I need that. I really need some lightness in my life, in my heart. And so you get a free training session at a gym. So that's what I did. I asked him with a lot of fear and trembling for a free training session. And that first training session changed my life. And I've actually tried to get in contact with this trainer since and haven't been able to hunt him down. But if he's listening, I hope he feels encouraged that he changed my life.
And so he asks you, have you ever thought of becoming a personal trainer?
Right. So I had this great transformation with him. And yes, I had thought about it because I was a dancer in college, did ballet and all the dancing with my music and theater training. And so I was always in the gym. We all were. Like your body was your instrument. You had to take care of it. So it was sort of second nature to me. But the part that was most exciting to me was this idea of doing what he did for me, which was working one-on-one with someone to uncover their motivation, to uncover what matters to them, make an action plan, and then live it out, which is what I do today. So it was like the Lord led me to that spot through so much pain. Like I never would have chosen that for myself. I never would have woken up on a college day and said, I think I need to switch my major to personal training. But the Lord wanted me there. So I did become a personal trainer, and I loved it. I mean, now having 3 kids, I can't imagine being in a gym. But I miss that in-person, one-to-one, seeing someone's insecurities and speaking truth into those. And watching someone physically transform, but also at the same time, emotionally transform. I caught the bug.
And you did really well at it. You were like one of the best around. But then you also say, and I quote, "My work became my worth. I had to prove to everybody that I was enough."
Yes. Yeah. So, here I had gone from this career that was a very elite career at the time. Like I went to the best school for it, graduated with a great degree, did really well. Like everybody thought I was going to do great in theater. And so I felt like I was a disappointment to everybody. And I thought, I need to prove myself. Okay, I'm going to jump into this other career then, and I'm going to show them. And it wasn't like anybody was saying to me, you gave up, you're a failure. I was telling myself that story. And so that's what I did. I worked my tail off. I also did it under the guise of thinking, well, I really love this. I'm doing very good work.
Sure.
And I think we do that, don't we? We find these things that seem good, but then we take them to an extreme. So yeah, my work became my worth. And I just felt like I've created this new identity for myself and I'm worth it. And I had to maintain that in my head.
Wow. Just for a few seconds, I'd like to pause and thank the sponsor of this episode, Kendra Dahlstrom. She's a friend of mine. You can find her over at kendradahlstrom.com. That's KendraDahlstrom.com. She's got this online community of which I'm a part of. And, for over 20 years, Kendra was a consultant to Fortune 500 companies. And, she began to want more for her life than just collecting a paycheck. So she's searching with God, what is that all about? Is there a God purpose to my life? Is there a calling on my life? And it took her a while, but she figured that out. and she wants to help you figure that out as well. So she's got this online site which has a daily Bible study that you can go through. It's got hours of content by video and personal coaching and just lots of things there. The online community is called Live Into Your Calling. You can be a part of that. And as a bonus to 24 Today podcast listeners, she's offering a special discounted rate of $29 per month. So you can just go to kendradahlstrom.com/training and enter the promo code MyGift to get that special discount. Again, it's kendradahlstrom.com/training. Enter the promo code MyGift to get a real good discount on that community. You can find the link and the code in the show notes. Thanks, Kendra. Now let's get back to the podcast. So you met another trainer. You and trainers and gyms seem to have a lot. Okay, like everyone's going to go and sign up for a gym membership, but so you met another trainer.
I did. I met another trainer, and like I said, New York is a really interesting place. It is difficult to make friends. You kind of have to make friends where you work because it's just the logistics. If you've never lived there, the logistics are that it takes you at least 45 minutes to an hour to get from your house to where you're going. Usually the hours are a lot longer in New York City. It is a city that never sleeps because people work really long hours. I always say that you don't go to New York to live, and maybe someone that's listening says, yes, I do. I don't go to New York City to live. You go there to work. So that's what I did. And so I spent all my time with other trainers and found a really good friend there, another male trainer there, and we ended up dating. And we ended up falling in love. We ended up very quickly getting engaged, and we were set to be married. And my parents, I just remember them saying, I don't know about this, Lara. We don't know about this guy. Our marriage track was just very quick, and we just pushed on forward. And then Hurricane Ivan hit my family's house in Florida. And that was very sobering. So their house was pretty well destroyed in a lot of ways. And it was.
Did you live there too? Did you live there growing up?
I had. I did. It was my childhood home.
Oh my.
Yep. And it was another one of those experiences like we chatted about before where your life kind of flashes before your eyes. And you're just given a choice to pivot in that moment. Am I gonna move forward and just harness this truth that there is a brevity to life and I want to use it well and I want to use it for what matters, or am I going to keep going like I've always done?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So initially you thought you were going to work on Broadway for the rest of your life, and then you switch and have to shut that door, and then waitress and then the gym and meeting a trainer, meeting another trainer, and then the hurricane hits your house in Florida, your family's house, and you say, nothing of what I was doing in New York City mattered at that moment.
Yeah. Like I said, these are these moments where it's kind of like when you watch a really good movie, like one that really moves you, and it leaves you feeling this, oh wow, okay, the rest of my life is going to be different after this. Like something about someone else's story or something in your own life becomes clear, and you think, all right, I got to change. And I decided to do that. Like a lot of times we watch, again, the example of a good movie, watch a good movie, we think our life is going to change. The next day we wake up, we don't really do anything about it.
Right.
But for me, something about this, I thought, okay. And so we left New York City and moved in with my parents, and for the purpose of helping them to rebuild their lives. And there was really not much logic to it.
Yeah.
I mean, why leave a 6-figure job? Why do that? Why leave this thing that you've built? Why do that? All I can say is that when it comes down to it, I've asked this question of thousands of women across the world. The thing that matters most to us in the big picture typically circles around relationships. And there is this almost unexplainable decision-making piece that happens when you're making a decision for the love of someone else. And I just thought, I can't let my parents walk through this alone. So we moved.
And you say, again, and I quote, "When we focus so much on what didn't go well, we miss what did go well. When we are focused on the imperfection of our lives or in our hearts or in our character, we miss the author and perfecter of our faith." At this point in your story, does any of that make sense yet, or is that something, again, that's just a later on thing that you figure out?
I would say that my faith was super fledgling at the time. I would have called myself a Christian. I would have, been able to quote a Bible verse or two for you, but I was not living for him by any stretch of the imagination, because I was never really shown how. I didn't know what that kind of life looked like. I just knew that I was focused on succeeding, on making what I considered at the time the most of my life and of my impact on this world. Trying to check all the boxes of career and marriage and like all the things I thought you were supposed to do. So yeah, I mean, again, there are times in our lives where we feel like, I don't know what life lesson to draw from this. And it will come. Like, it will come eventually.
So at this point in your life, you've been through so much. I mean, one thing really after another. You really hadn't had much time to breathe, or even much of a stretch of time where you felt like things have they're working out. I mean, it was just one thing after another, and then all of the emotions and all of the stress and the difficulty and uprooting your lives into a house where you had grown up, and now it's in turmoil and shattered, and you're throwing your life into trying to repair this home and to make something of it, and it's kind of a perfect storm for more stuff to happen. Of course, you and your fiance had, you'd been thrown into an awful place to try to develop a relationship, and you hadn't really known each other that long to begin with, but somehow you're trying to work it out, and then there was a phone call that came about your brother.
Yes, that phone call. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a cool thing to hear you reflect this story back, because I think, Tom, you're such a great, you're very intuitive about people's stories. And so just to hear the arc told through your words, it just gives me chills to think, the Lord can make something marvelous out of what feels totally broken and messed up. And he did. But it got worse before it got better. My brother was working at the ski resort in Vail as a line cook on one of the mountains. And he was snowboarding his off time after hours, after they had closed the park, and snowboarded right off of a service road, which essentially is like snowboarding off a cliff. And he laid there for 45 minutes, unable to move, unable to talk, unable to understand that he had severed his spinal cord. And somebody found him. Praise the Lord. And they took him into emergency surgery. Somewhere along the line, they found my mom's phone number. Somebody had called us to say, hey, your son is being taken into emergency surgery. We don't know if he's going to live or not. You should probably get on a plane. And I remember that night just feeling like, I actually didn't really feel a whole lot, to be honest. I think that we were in shock. I don't know how we got to the airport. I don't know how my mom and I got on the plane. I just know we got there. I don't think we said anything to each other on the plane. All I remember is walking in to the hospital, to this intensive care spinal unit where, praise the Lord, my brother was alive, but I think basically half of my brother's heart was still there. Walk in, and there's 4 doctors circled around the bottom base of his bed with him listening, just saying things like, it's very unlikely that your son will ever walk again. And my brother was super active, not just snowboarding, but his heart of hearts was alive when he was rock climbing. And so this was a very devastating thing on so many levels. Just felt like our lives were never going to be the same again.
And then there's this reality that you still have a date to be married. I mean, you've got a date coming up.
Yeah. Yep.
And life just doesn't ever stop. I mean, it just doesn't ever like time out, and so we can figure this out. But you have this date that you're supposed to be married at the very house that you've been repairing, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And it actually was, this phone call came very shortly after we had gotten married.
Okay.
So it's like, and it's easy to mix this up because it happened so close together. I mean, it was like 4 days apart. That's how close it was. So it was right after we had gone through with this marriage where we had put this house back together at the very last minute. It just like, we were kind of like walking on unshaky ground to begin with. And then this phone call comes in and it just felt like, I have no idea what's happening with my life. We both felt very numb at that point.
It couldn't have felt like right to just go ahead and do the wedding, right? I mean, you couldn't have felt great about it, but
No,
it was just what you're supposed to do. It was the thing to do.
Well, the thing is, it became this beautiful opportunity for our community to come together to have something to look to. There was so much turmoil and, like all the blue roofs and people's lives were just destroyed at that point. That this thought of, Lara is getting married and we're going to help you put the house back together. I'm going to help you do this. I'll help you make favors. It became this thing that really was a wonderful experience at the time. It felt dissonant and off to us as a couple, I'll say, but I think to our community, it gave them a spot of hope.
Yeah, it was like Christmas.
So we just felt like exactly.
Everything else is going bad in the world, but Christmas just is here, and so let's breathe and it's Christmas, but then Christmas doesn't last too long. And
you're absolutely right.
From your book, you have a couple of books, but from your book, Make It Happen, you say, and if I could read a little bit longer quote here, you say, and I quote, "I have struggled more in writing this paragraph than any in this book. This isn't pretty to type or remember, but it happened. My marriage crumbled. It happened so fast, like the hurricane that tore through the town. We lacked the firm foundation that only God could solidify. I remember the day that I sat in the courthouse to finalize our divorce, less than a year after our wedding, and my dad telling me how disappointed he was and my mom crying. In sharing my failure of what followed, I hope it will help you know what I know now. Your past and your mistakes, they do not define you." That's a lot. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm like saying amen to my own words because that is ever true. Our past, our mistakes, going through this acute period of turmoil of switching careers into something different, working myself to the bone, getting married, and then very quickly after that falling apart in the midst of my brother, his life just being ripped out from underneath him, or at least that's what it felt like at the time. That's a humbling place to be. And whether or not people that are listening, you've gone through something like this, or maybe for you, it is just something maybe even that feels more simple or even harder than this, no matter what the scale is, difficult things like this, as much as we do not like to think about this at the time, they are hopefully for our good. And I look back at these things and I think I am not happy that I had to go through this, but I'm so grateful that I did because I
Mm.
get to tell God's story in it. And I get to stand here before you today, not feeling guilt from that, not feeling shame from that, knowing that I've totally been released from
Mm.
that stuff. It is difficult emotionally to go back through those things,
Mm.
but yeah.
So at the age of 26, you say in one of your podcasts you were living with your parents, you were unemployed and divorced, and you met a man named Michael, and he shared a quote with you, and the quote is, "Feel the fear and do it anyway." Now, you hadn't spent much time up to that point in your life letting yourself feel, have you?
Nope.
Yeah.
No, because I was just pushing on through. Like I said, my training was you got to become someone else all the time. You take on their emotions, their problems, and there wasn't a whole lot of time for my own to be sorted through.
Mm.
And I didn't want to feel anything because I thought if I let myself feel any of this for even 1 minute, it's going to feel so out of control. I'm not going to be able to control my emotion about this, or my anger about this, or my sadness, or my despair about these things. And honestly, I couldn't even consciously think that at the time. I just knew feeling was not fun. And so I didn't want to go there. But yeah, I started working with a therapist. I put myself in therapy. I just thought, well, I don't really have anywhere to go from here. I need someone to help me sort through all of this. I met an incredible man named Michael DeMaria, still a dear friend of mine to this day. And this was, I guess, like over 15 years ago. But yeah, he shared that quote from me that really meant you should feel first. It doesn't mean just like jump out of an airplane, feel the fear and do it anyway. But if you're feeling sad about this, grieve. If you're feeling angry, find a healthy way to release that. Bring it to the Lord's feet and feel the fear and do it anyway. Those words really helped me to start for the very first time to feel things in my life, to be able to move through them.
Were you afraid if you felt you would feel, again, those feelings of being on stage and exposed and vulnerable? And
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah. I think that is a really great insight because yes, I mean, that's, I think what we fear as humans, that if we feel even in the privacy of our closet, if we are there
mhm,
just exposed and vulnerable with the Lord and just crying or whatever it is, that will mean we're weak. And we
yeah,
equate
hmm
weakness
hmm
with a lack of worth.
hmm
And I know that's not true now, but that's what I felt. I felt like if I feel broken, that
hmm
must mean that I am broken. If I feel weak or sad, that must
hmm
mean that I am weak. And we know that that's not true.
yes,
Like you can feel a whole lot of things, but our
hmm
feelings don't define
sure.
us.
Laura, we are headed down to the home stretch of this wonderful interview. I wish we could talk more because you have so much to share. Again, listeners, this is Laura Casey, Lara, last name Casey. Her website is cultivatewhatmatters.com. She's on Instagram, Facebook live broadcasts, has conferences called Making Things Happen. She's got a couple of books, Make It Happen, Surrender Your Fear, Take the Leap, Live on Purpose is one book. Her new book is Cultivate, a Grace-Filled Guide to Growing an Intentional Life. She's got Bible study journals, Cultivate a Homeschool Planner, just newsletter, just so much that Laura puts forth that is so helpful. So, Laura, you got hired where else? Not a bank, but at a local gym.
Yes,
And you met a man named Ari, and you later
I
married him.
did.
Can you tell me about that?
He's just the best. He is. I will first share this that um just to kind of give you our story in a nutshell. I shared a little bit of it before, but we met at the gym. We got married very quickly in Las Vegas, which is a whole different story. And um, we went through a really difficult time after that. I thought, man, I've already been through enough, God, but apparently not. So we went through a long period of us just being like two ships passing in the night and our marriage being super
Yeah,
rocky.
yeah.
Um, And that was very difficult, much harder than anything that I've shared with you up until this point. But I don't have time to tell that whole story. But just today, we have been, and it's really cool. It's really cool what God can do when you go through hard stuff. He has put in us a soft spot for other couples that are in hard places. And nothing gives me more joy. And I don't mean this in like the traditional joy sense, but nothing gives me more joy than to be able to help someone who's hurting in a marriage. Because I get to transfer what the Lord has taught me in my story, the hope that I have, the belief that the impossible is totally possible, to another person. And that's just neat. Like, that is such a gift. So we've been just trying to encourage a specific couple right now. And he was talking to one of those members of that couple, and he just texted me today, and he said, this person asked who my best friend is, and I said, you. I'm so grateful that you're my best friend. And let me tell you, I never would imagine my husband, Ari, saying that we are best friends back in that period of our lives. Never thought. I heard people say that their husband was their best friend, and I was like, that's good for you.
Sure. Right.
I don't think that's ever going to happen to me.
Right.
So if you're there right now, I'm just here to tell you that it can happen. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen without hard work. It's not going to happen without like getting on your knees in prayer all the time, because you can't do this marriage alone. But yes, I met Ari at the gym. He asked me for workout advice, or so he says. I think he was just trying to hit on me, but he says he really just wanted workout advice.
So now that you're married, you probably don't have a gym membership, right? Now that you're married, you don't need a gym membership, right?
Well, what's funny is I don't actually have time to go to the gym because I have 3 kids to take care of in the morning. So I chase my kids.
All right. So the honeymoon wore off really fast. The Iraq War happened, and you really had a decision to make. I mean, things are really going not good real fast.
Yeah. Yep. So I moved back again home with my parents. We had moved to California, Ari and I, after we got married. Moved back in with my parents while he was in Iraq. And that's when I really started to find myself for the first time again, going through this rocky period in our marriage. I was able to start going to church. This is not something that I had done before, and at least not consistently. And while he was gone, I also really needed a project to keep my mind occupied. And that's, like I said, where Southern Weddings came from. And he came back from Iraq, and our marriage was still difficult. Definitely absence makes the heart grow fonder, especially when you have someone who's deployed with the Marines. My love for him and my respect for him grew so deeply during that time. But our marriage issues remained. I think, though, that this, life or death experience of deployment, it is what it is. Like, if you go and you're deployed to war, you cannot help but face the fact that that might be it for you. I do think that started to crack both of our hearts open a little bit.
So things started to go better eventually. Once you surrendered. I mean, not to him, but I mean, once you surrendered your heart to God in your life, and
yes,
you
they did.
You cracked, basically. I mean,
yes,
that shell
Yep, took about 2 to 3 years from the time that he got back from Iraq. And that's why I always say it's not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
There's so much of me that had to surrender. There's so much of him that had to surrender.
Yeah.
But yes, and I don't mean this in like a really like Christianese way, but truly by his grace.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we didn't deserve any of this. You really didn't.
Yeah.
We had messed up so bad in our marriage. But we understood what grace actually meant. And he brought our marriage back together over time.
And over time, you became a wedding planner, and then eventually began what you do now, cultivate what matters. And you are helping women all over the world, I'm sure all over the world, and to try to help them to learn the things that you have learned through all the hardships in your life. Way to go. Good job. You're doing good.
Take no credit, but that's very kind of you. I appreciate your encouragement so much.
All right. This is just like 10 seconds or less. I've got real quick comments. Okay. And if nothing else, I just want to get your quotes out there. Okay. So here, these are your quotes. You get to change if your mind, I'm sorry. Let me do it again. You get to change your mind if you want to. 10 seconds or less. Go.
You do. You get to change your mind if you want to, because your mind, it's not 10 seconds or less. I'm not good at that. But here's what happens. Our thoughts, they start as thoughts in our minds. They go into decisions in our heart, and they move out to our fingertips, essentially. So if you want to change your course, you first have to change your mind, and you have the ability to do that.
Here's another one. It's okay to grow slow. In fact, it's good.
Yes, my plants grow slow. Everything in my garden grows slow. I don't stick a seed out there, and the next day I get a full-grown peach tree. So it's good to grow slow. Here's
another one. When we only focus on the finish line or on perfect outcomes, we miss all the life that happens along the way. We miss potentially better outcomes, and I think we've talked about that. Another one. Little by little, progress adds up, and in the wait, we are ripened and ready. I think that was on maybe your most recent podcast. Trust that what you want to cultivate matters enough to allow it to grow over time. It matters enough to fall down 7 times and get up 8. I like that.
Yes. Yep.
And here we go. This is it, and we are going to wrap this wonderful conversation up. This is one of your quotes. You say, "Your mess can become your message."
Indeed. It's not the successes on paper that I've had that have been tipping points for other people. It has always been the hard stuff that adds up to the good stuff. Like, just the same thing with my flowers outside. They don't grow in perfection. They grow in dirt. And I think our lives do too.
So everyone, listen to the podcast. Go to cultivatewhatmatters.com. Just Google Lara Casey, Lara Casey, Casey. You'll find her all over the place, and she's just doing good things to help people like myself and many others. And Laura, thank you so much. Again, my name is Pastor Tom Weitzel. You can find me at 24today.org, and I'm just all about encouraging people, helping people to find the most in the 24-hour period we live in. I'm on YouTube, interviews like this, and just different places. So thanks again, Laura, for being my guest today.
Oh, it was such a joy. Thank you for the good work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
A joy.
Thank you. And remember, to listeners, there's still time left in this 24-hour period to live life today. If this podcast has been helpful for you and you haven't already subscribed, just go to the subscribe button that you'll see on the page and subscribe. That way you'll make sure that you get everything that I put on the podcast the moment that it's available. And if it's helpful for you, it probably would be helpful for someone that you know as well. If you could send them a link or tell them about the podcast, and then also comment on the particular podcast wherever you're at. Rate it, if you will, and that will help others to be able to see and hear about the podcast.